Can you tell which of these children was not born free? Can you tell which of these children was not born equal? Can you tell which of these children does not deserve to be treated with dignity? We can't either. Human right number one. We are all born free and equal. What are human rights? Find out at youthforhumanrights.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to MomTalk. It is an honor to have this conversation today, this very important conversation today with my dear friend, mom friend from school and our community, and someone who I've admired every time I'm in a gathering or we're sitting and coming alongside of each other as parents. I am really encouraged and inspired to speak my truth because she speaks her truth. And oftentimes with such courage and such conviction that I believe it is so important for our youth today, especially for our girls today, and especially for families who are devoted to cultivating peace and empathy today. So why is it important to have this information with such wonderful peace learning leaders like Vanessa Rodriguez Spencer? Because she has been one leading force, not just in her own home, in her own community, in her own circle and bubble, but also beyond, internationally, globally. And she promotes global citizenship and why we need to empower women, empower children, empower girls to speak their truth. Vanessa, welcome to MomTalk.
Thank you, Nelly, for having me back. I'm really grateful to be here and excited to have this conversation again with you and moving the ball forward.
Awesome. So we're talking about cultivating empathy and love. It is a very important conversation to have this month, right? We're talking about what it means to speak your truth when it comes to love and living with freedom and joy and love.
Yes, I want to say thank you for such a beautiful opening and such an important organization, I think, for people to go look at. Up until you and I had a conversation prior to the show, I was unaware that there was an organization dedicated to the youth understanding what their rights are from birth, like what their actual birthrights are. And I think it's a really important foundation for them to have as we continue having conversations about equality, inclusivity, diversity, and recognizing one another for who we are. If we can all recognize that we begin at the same place on an equal playing field, that would be a really beautiful thing, because for so long and in so many different cultures and different parts of our civilization during time in our history, that was not the case. So to change that narrative, it's really important to understand that by almost whatever religion you were born into and practice, that is the God-given right, whatever God it is that you pray to, that we are all equal. So thank you for continuing your work and having the conversation and beginning the show with that. It was a really beautiful piece.
Awesome. Last time we were gathered as Curtis School families, we were attending a wonderful seminar, or I would say parent enrichment speaker series by Derek Gay, who's Dr. Derek Gay, who's again, a peace learning leader in cultivating and promoting what it means to raise a global citizen, what global citizenship means to families today, and how we can cultivate cultural competency so that children are well-rounded. Children have better social, emotional, spiritual, and cognitive intelligence. And I know social intelligence didn't used to encompass cultural competency as much as we hear about it today. And I know you've been so like front leading.
I've been trying.
Such like the light. When I hear you at all these meetings, you have been bringing so much light and joy into joining this conversation. Because I remember when we started these conversations a few years ago, it was with a little, caution and a little, diplomacy, and let's try not to step on anyone's toes. And this last meeting, it was like parents were on fire.
They were. And it was really exciting to see.
Yeah.
I think for so long we were, again, told how we should feel, told how we should approach this, sort of spoon-fed as to what we could handle, where we were in this place of conversation. And I think a lot of it had to do with the previous regime and how they like to handle things because of what made them comfortable and where they were at this place in the conversation. But I think what now we've started to see in this last 24 months, these last 2 years, really in terms of what this election cycle did and post-election did to us as a people, we're ready. We're ready because we got here to a place where we weren't willing to see each other and we weren't really willing to have these hard conversations in an honest way. We wanted to have them in a way that always left somebody feeling good. However, these conversations, when you're being honest and when you're really trying to do the work and you're really trying to get to that next place, there's always a hurdle to jump over. And running track, my kids run track, whenever you learn to jump the hurdles, you're always going to hit it. Your shins are going to get bruised. You might fall. You might trip over it. The hurdle's going to come down, and you're going to have to get up and keep going. And that's this conversation. This conversation is very much that. It's not going to feel so good. You're going to hit your shins a few times, but the bruise is going to heal. You're going to get back on the track, and you're going to keep running to jump the next one. So that in the end, when you cross the finish line, you've accomplished so much, you've learned so much, and that relationship and the community that you've cultivated now is so real, so honest, and so connected. Because everybody feels heard and seen. And even being heard isn't always about agreeing. It's just about understanding that's where you're coming from, that's where I'm coming from, and we can civilly agree to disagree. I hear you, even though I don't agree with you, I hear you, and let's figure out a way how we can still move forward together in spite of not necessarily always seeing eye to eye on everything, because that's not really the world, and that's okay too. So I think that as a school community, this last conversation that we had, it was absolutely refreshing to hear so many across the community really ready and wanting and willing to have that conversation. Because while their experience isn't my experience, they're still having an experience that doesn't always make them feel so good or their children feel so good. Because their child might be a very empathetic person and takes on what their friend might be feeling. And then how does that parent arm their child to go back to school the next day and navigate these waters or help make their friend feel better? Or that parent is now feeling somehow uneasy or embarrassed or shameful that this happened. And why is this happening in a place where I don't feel that way? I didn't know somebody else felt that way. So it gets touchy.
Yeah. And what I really appreciated, what I felt grateful for was, the number of attendees. First of all, the group is getting larger. And it was just heartwarming to see that this time around, instead of the 15, 20 usual suspects, we had like a couple hundred parents, even though that's still not so big compared to our very large, school community. It's still a big step that we are growing. It was heartwarming to see their parents who are owning this, who are actually, I felt like, I don't know about you, but I felt like they're having actual mindset shifts in what it means to be thriving and experience success in a global citizenship way. And buying into it, right?
Absolutely. And I thought it was really wonderful that there was such a strong representation of the Board of Trustees. It really shows that as a board, the people who sort of the buck stops there with school in terms of decision making for curriculum and hiring and where we go as a culture and how that continues to grow. It was really nice to see so many of them there and present and participating in the conversation and showing support, and really showing support of our headmaster, or head of school, reprogramming, taking out that word from my lexicon, but really showing support of where her heart has always seemed to be, and offering her the encouragement of, we're here with you and we're ready to push forward with you. And I think that says a lot. I think it also says a lot to the parents, the new parents, like you said, who showed up, who see that this is really something that we as a school are very conscious about, and our board of trustees showing up at 6 o'clock on a Thursday night. This is really something that they value too, and they're fully invested. So I need to get on board, and while this might be my first meeting, this certainly won't be my last, because I see it's coming from the top down and the bottom up, and we're all meeting in the middle of the road, and this is a really good and powerful thing to keep going.
And I have to say, it was the first time that from a heart place, I felt a lot of love. I felt a lot of compassion. I felt that, finally, my goodness, this community is getting it. They're, feeling connected. We're connected together on cultivating this empathy as it relates to building on our cultural competencies. And it really made me feel so happy and joyful and love. I mean, bottom line, if we're trying to raise and cultivate compassion in our community, which I know is part of our mission statement, it's actually why we chose Curtis. Yes. It was just beautiful. So thank you, Mira. Thank you, Ms. Ratz, Ms. Ratnazar. We love our community and what's happening in it, and how this global citizenship is so well integrated into our children's future and their educational system. So as a mom, this is a very important piece of this Mom Talk today. And I know we started with human rights. We started with why is it important for the youth to have ownership, understanding of what it means to be equal. That's the first article. We are born equal, free, and we all deserve to be loved. So if we really focus on that from a developmental perspective and a peace learning perspective, that means in the bonding, the attachment, the relationship we have with our children and with their friends within our community, that we need to cultivate that. Again, not just empathy, not just cultural competency, but let's talk about our rights, our human rights, and what it means to live in today's world, in today's society, as a woman, as a mom, as someone who's working. I mean, I know you're busy working in the Hollywood entertainment world. I'm a psychologist, and I work with families, and I try to cultivate peace learning. But how are these stories of human rights related to our children knowing how to honor each other's rights, how to be respectful, how to have this global perspective? That this is really the first Declaration of Human Rights. It started with actually Cyrus the Great, Cyrus Cylinder, many 2,500 years ago. And it started off by, Cyrus freeing the slaves and saying everyone has an equal right to live, to have a job, to have their own religion, to love freely, to marry whoever they want. So Cyrus, as the king of Persia, started this conversation 2,500 years ago. And so if our children don't know about this and they don't hear about this very important document, and also how to pass this on to their children, how to cultivate this at school, how to honor it as a day-to-day, like life skills. I think these 30 articles should be part of life skills, and we should relate it to the educational skills and things that kids are learning.
Absolutely. I think it should become almost like they're pillars, pillars in life to operate by. Growing up Catholic, we had the 10 Commandments, and part of me just always believes that those are just really easy. When you're a good person and you have morals and scruples, those are really simple rules to follow, but these should be the commandments of life. These should be what we follow and what we recognize, because these are truly the principles of the way one should walk through this world amongst others. I think that when you are a good human being, it's easy to not steal, it's easy to not lie, it's easy to not do all those things when you're already operating from a place of, I see you, I feel you, I love you, I want to help you, I want you to help me, I want us to move in this space and place and time together. All those other things come into play. So yes, 2,500 years ago, somebody was incredibly wise, and somewhere along the line things became so divided, and we started to siphon off into groups and different cultures and practices. And I think it goes back to that, when we start dividing ourselves very clearly into clear groups, we start drawing boundaries, and boundaries are okay. Boundaries are okay, but when we start saying that this is me, this is you, and start pointing fingers as to deciding which practice is better than the other, that's when we start getting in trouble.
Can you think of an example as a mom, having gone through elementary school with your kids or other kids? You don't have to get specific with, people, but can you think of scenarios in which you felt socially responsible to step up, intervene, or bring something that raises awareness related to, human rights and equal rights and equality? And
it's funny, I think as a woman of color, I've always felt that social responsibility. It's always been a part of my DNA. I mean, growing up where I grew up, my brother and I were really, when we first started school, we were the only kids of color, and it wasn't until second grade that another brother, two brothers, moved into the community, and they were then the only two African Americans, and then my brother and I were the only two Afro-Cubans or Afro-Latin, and we were four. Now we were four. Then there was another child who had just immigrated from Mexico, and he and his sibling were there. So at some point there started to be an influx of color, but their experience was quite different than mine and my brother's. And I don't know if it was because our family unit, our structure was much more, I don't want to say stable, but much more traditional in what our community saw as the way to live. So yeah, I always felt like I was fighting their fight with them. Or when somebody would tell me, I'm going to send you back to your country, I'm like, I'm third generation, thanks, but I grew up here. So it's always been in me. And I feel like Bella and Christopher have had a different experience, and in some ways, because of the life they live, they've been shielded from certain things. Bella has had a few incidents during her early years at school. But again, it was more, I say that, as we were talking earlier about judgment, it's the world that child lives in that tried to push their judgment upon her. And it's more sad for me to think that that's the narrow-minded world that child is growing up in, and the lens that he sees and views people, and how he values people that don't necessarily look like him. That makes me sad, but it makes me sad for him, because my daughter is growing up in a really loving home, a very honest home, a home that calls things is how it is in the moment it is, and values people, truly values people, but values them for who they show you as they are. I'm a firm believer, and I don't put more value on a person after they show me who they are. I can value them for who they are at that place in their life. Doesn't mean they can't change, but this is who they are, and this is the value I can attribute to them based upon how they behave and their actions and their interactions with me. I don't like to sugarcoat it for them, because I like for them to recognize and say it's okay to have all kinds of people in your life, but it's also valuable to recognize how much time and what should be invested in certain relationships.
Yeah, I always like to break it down from a PeaceLearning lens. I always say to kids, I say, well, the decisions you make or the relationships you're in, the behaviors and what people say and what people do and how people feel either leads to more connection or it leads to disconnect or disconnection or detachment, however your child understands that language. But so love is when we're connecting and we're coming closer to each other. And so if you really want to, and many families who do care about peace learning and cultivating love, their intent and their vision is to sort of bring this love up and raise this love within themselves as well as their children within the family. I know in our family that's very important. It's actually primary to, it's beyond any other value. And so if you're trying to really bring up that love and peace and joy, living in peace and living in love, then you look for opportunities to connect. And so for children to know and be empowered by, if you're not connecting, then that means there's some learning, peace learning, that needs to happen in order for your brain to grasp and get to a place of awareness or learning, peace learning, so that you can connect. And if you're disconnecting, first of all, taking responsibility for that, disconnect individually. I always say to my kids, you're responsible in whatever aspect of that and owning it. You're not responsible for the other person's behavior, but what you're doing, at least if you have awareness and you can own it, then you can learn from it and you can evolve from it. And so that's important. Step one, take responsibility for your action and become aware, because we are all growing. I always say to my kids, we're growing together. I always say, oh my gosh, that was an epic fail. I'm constantly apologizing to them.
Yeah, and I think I think apologizing as a parent to your kids is a really important lesson to teach them that we are not infallible. This is a new job for us. When the day they were born, it was like you didn't come with a handbook, you didn't come with the rest of the instructions.
That's right.
This is a learning on the job experience for us, and I will make mistakes. And I will admit to you, and I've made those mistakes. I can only promise you I will try every single day to do my best. Whatever my best is that day, it will always be. But and we're still
sometimes.
growing. Yes, absolutely.
We react. I
and
know,
as adults, we still are growing.
We're growing. I know I've been in situations where I was more reactive than my children who were the recipient of maybe some racist remark, because I knew the cues. I was very aware of them. So I wanted to. I could feel my blood boil and getting angry, but then I had to take a deep breath and I had to say, listen, this is their peace learning journey. You can't protect your kids from everything, but you can come alongside of them, but first observe and see how they're going to react, because their response sometimes are very different than ours. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, they see it through a very new lens. And sometimes it actually raises, the way they manage these situations raises awareness for the other kid. I've seen, and I've witnessed situations where the other kid had an aha moment because he was just ignorant.
Right, and
just
didn't
ignorant.
know. Absolutely.
Yeah, didn't
and
know.
I think that's part of it is that, kids are young. I mean, they're kids for a reason, and they should be able to be children, but in that we can't lose those teachable moments and not meet them where they are and help get them to that next place of understanding and learning how to cope and navigate through these uncomfortable situations. And I think sometimes the situation can be uncomfortable for the person who may have unwillingly made them feel hurt, and take that time to help educate that other child, as well as help your child know how to really speak up and defend themselves in a way that doesn't put the other person on offense to want to attack back, but to articulate and say, hey, this made me feel a certain way because this is not something we say to one another, you know. And that's something that I think we're all starting to get comfortable with having to have these conversations. I mean, again, I've been having these conversations for a really long time with my kids since they were little. And I think the one incident that hit me really hard was after Jordan Davis was shot in Florida at a gas station. You know, my daughter Bella was still rather young. This goes back several years now, and she just looked at me from the back, you know, through the rearview mirror, and said from the back seat, "You know, Mom, why is it that so many boys who look like my brother are just being killed for no reason?" And I'm like, wow, Bella, I don't really know how to explain that to you, but it's been happening for years, and until we get to a place in this country where everybody really sees each other for who they are as a valuable human being, we're kind of going to be in this situation. And unfortunately, for 400 years, we were seen as invaluable. And for the last 50, we've still been trying to fight in spite of, you know, Jim Crow having been dissolved, so to speak. We've still been trying to be seen as equal and earn this place at the table. You know, it's just something we're going to have to continue to work on. And now that conversation has spread to so many different pockets. It has spread to the way that this war in the Middle East has cast this blanket and this cloud over so many in the Middle Eastern cultures, be it Afghani, Pakistani, Iranian, you know, everybody assumes that they're all the same, and it's such a shame because no, and here's a war that we've been fighting, and it's really a war on ideology as opposed to a war on beautiful human beings. And unfortunately, there's always casualties of war and innocents that perish because of the war that is going on around them. But we can't lose sight of those people that were innocent and lost their lives, because they really are the true victims of all of this. And again, it really goes back to the way you started. When we see people for who they are, when we value life itself as important, I think that the culture and the mental dynamic will shift faster than it would just by having these formal conversations. I think sometimes when you let life happen and we really start to just act and be rather than try and tell, it's easier. There's a wonderful book called The 4 Agreements, and part of it is one of the agreements is when you change, you don't have to tell people that you change. They will automatically know you change because you will just be. They will see the change because you will become the change you have wanted to be. So I think if we could adopt that a little bit more in our daily lives, it would be helpful.
Yes, and have courage, because I have
Yes.
to say, in our motherhood journey, you know, as moms in the same educational community, you have been a very strong voice, and you've encouraged me and many of my mom friends just by speaking your truth.
Thank
You've
you.
been doing it for years.
Thank you.
And so you're absolutely right on that if you are, and you live that honest, truthful life, and you speak your truth, it does help cultivate and helps the community thrive and grow in peaceful ways. And so we all benefit as a community. Now we have a, school community that we're all benefiting because students have more peaceful lives. They're having more peaceful relationships. And if they don't have peace within their connectional and interpersonal relationships, they know how to speak their truth. They know where to go and how to get mentorship and how to get the right help so that other students don't suffer. And I think that's very, very powerful, those seeds of peace.
Absolutely. And, I think that this really wonderful program that we've started at school, especially with the upper grades, the Breaking Bread, initial idea was so powerful, and I think that they've rolled it back a little to try and baby step their way into it. But I think if they just let the kids blow the top right off the can, they would be surprised how much the parents in the community could really learn from them, because these kids are so aware, and they're quite articulate how they address and speak about the issues that they see on campus. Because really, while we're parents, and yes, we paid to send them there, and we are participants in the community, you know, for the most part, the real community members of that school are the students. And they see things firsthand, and they really live and breathe the change that is happening because of how much time they spend there every day, week after week after week. And I think we need to really let them lead us a little bit and be our guides. So I feel really confident about this program that has been implemented. I hope that we take a page out of their playbook. I hope that some of the older kids in the group really sort of be really shaker-uppers. I know that's not necessarily a word, but I hope that they're a little bit revolutionary, and I'm just going to say it. I hope that they're a little bit revolutionary and go against the grain a little bit and be some rule breakers and kind of color outside the lines of what were set as guidelines for this, because I think them doing that will help make the conversations more substantive for them and more substantive for the parents to really get to see just how free-thinking these kids are, how really aware, and how much more mature they are than sometimes we give them credit for. And while we like to say, and in some ways they do live in this beautiful bubble of what this campus is and what this world is that they have here in Los Angeles, they see it. They see it because there's so much happening for them that they're taking in through the TV, through this little 4-inch screen in their hand, or through a 13-inch laptop, or whatever it is that they get their other outside sources of information from. And it's happening for them daily on this campus, and we need to be more cognizant of that. I think that our outside forces have changed the way in which they grow up and how they grow up and what they become aware of so much earlier in some ways than many of us did growing up. And I think that also has to be a large part of the conversation and really addressed, because I think in some ways that makes it so much harder for them to get this because of all the outside influences and what certain looks and certain things have been given a value, as opposed to what is the most valuable.
That's right.
And so we're fighting this fight in multiple ways. It's a multi-pronged conversation and approach that we need to have.
But the fact that we are having this mom talk is so powerful. And I think, the youth leadership, the Youth for Youth leadership, I know you're involved with Step Up organization, empowering girls. It does start with youth and empowering youth to then reach out to other youth and to give value and to make it like this pillar of success that it is. Like, that's the true narrative. I think the other stuff, the fluff and all the shiny stuff is the false narrative.
Absolutely.
And so by us allowing them to step into this zone. So there is your organization. Tell us about Step Up and the latest.
Step Up, we have branched out. We used to just be Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago. This year we opened Dallas, and we have decided to go into Atlanta as well. We have serviced countless girls here in Los Angeles, as well as girls in New York. We are an organization that takes girls in 9th grade on through 12th, and we mentor them in 9th grade and start doing confidence building. We start doing one-on-one mentorship and weekly programs at their schools, where they start to really just connect with other girls that they may not have on their own, and start for them to recognize that they're not the only ones in this place in life that they're in. And so they come together and they mentor one-on-one with women across many multiple platforms of professions and business, and it's really to get them to start thinking of themselves as professional women so that they have the desire and ability to succeed in college once they graduate high school, get through college, and then get out into the workforce, and then have a network of women to reach back to. So part of it's a multi-platform organization of mentorship, building and establishing a network of women across multiple professions, and letting them know that we see them. Mm-hmm. We see them as the leaders of tomorrow, as the professional women of tomorrow, as the change makers, and for them to see themselves as that.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Do you partner up with other organizations who sort of empower women in the
that's
workforce?
something that I've been talking to the organization about, and I think that there are other organizations that we should be trying to do more partnerships with. It's not something that we've done well because it really hasn't been a focus as we've been trying to build out other cities. We were partnered up with Coach for the last several years. We're hoping that maybe we can figure out a way to continue the partnership with them, but they've been so valuable and so inspirational to us. Really welcomed our girls, especially our girls in New York, welcomed our girls. They're taking them to Fashion Week this week and showing them the girls that are interested in fashion and marketing and what have you. They're taking them to the Coach Fashion Show as they launch their new collection. They've done wonderful one-on-one mentoring with them at Coach headquarters in New York. KPMG has been an amazing partnership. U.S. Bank has been a wonderful partnership with us out here, helping them and providing internships, paid internships for the girls over the summer. ABC, Channing Powers at ABC, she's been really incredible about hosting events for the girls. So we really have some incredible women who sit on our local boards and who sit on our national board. I would like to see us partner up with an organization called Posse. It's really about helping kids when they get to college go in numbers in smaller groups so that when they leave for school, which is such a new experience of leaving home, that they feel more successful because they're not one amongst many, they're many amongst many, and they have a support group amongst themselves to keep them going. So we'll see. It's been a wonderful group of women to work with and see other women out there who have the same passion that I do, but it's really been amazing to see these young ladies who see a future that is really bright, and in many cases they will be. Now we're starting to get to a good split, so it makes me smile, but it used to be where in many cases they were the first generation to go to college. In some cases now we're starting to see it's the second child going to school, or their sister's already in college and almost finishing, and now they're the next wave of. So that's really, really inspiring, and lets me know that the program is really working the way that it should.
So for those of you who want to get more involved with Step Up, the website is
SU. I know it's so bad. If you just Google, I know it sounds bad because there are so many to remember. But if you Google the Step
also
Up
look
Women's
them up
Network
on Instagram, right?
Yes.
Here it is.
So on Instagram, they are Step Up Women's Network, all one word, no space, no caps. And then the website is www.suwn.org.
All right.
And that's Kelly Lee. She worked at ABC. She's still at ABC, but UK. She went over there to build that out, and she's been with Step Up for years and years. And
that's how you cultivate love, you people. You join these communities that give back and empower and inspire. And I always say, if you give love to the moms and the young ladies and the girls, that love is bound to grow and expand so much that you will just be shocked. So when we talk about, hashtag #MeToo campaigns, we also want to talk about those campaigns that women in leadership have been leading for years and years and years, and the other voices that are just as valuable as hashtag #MeToo. And hashtag #MeToo is another very passionate topic that I would love to have with you, Vanessa, on a different program, different show.
Absolutely.
So we will be back and talk about hashtag #MeToo with Vanessa, who's been in the Hollywood sort of realm of things and that world. And it's a very important topic. But today we just wanted to talk about cultivating empathy, cultivating love, cultural competency, how it impacts the love relationship at home, and how human rights are the very basic foundation of this conversation. And if we start from an equal platform, if we believe as individuals and human beings that we are equal to each other, and that once we step on campus, let's talk about schools, once we put our footsteps on campus or any environment, any social environment, that we all have equal rights, we all are entitled to living freely, cultivating love, empathy, and having equal rights, then we are more likely to honor each other and to respect each other and to feel equal as opposed to feeling superior or inferior. So, and that's a human right. That's our first declaration of human rights. And we have to empower our youth to speak this truth.
And our boys. I think as moms of girls and boys, we have to let our boys know how important it is to really to honor themselves by honoring everyone else as their equal, to see them the same way that they want to be seen. I think that that's incredibly important to to let boys know that spreading love, sharing love from a really peaceful place is something of strength. That strength doesn't come from being bullied or making somebody feel like they're less than you because you've been gifted of being born a man. I think that that's something that we need to address with our young boys and raise them to be confident enough to be willing to stand up for someone else, in particular women who might not be receiving the same successes that they are just because they're male and their friend is not, or their partner, their sister, their mother is not.
Every day our daughter, Cammie, has some story to share about trying to find her right on the basketball court. And she comes home with the story of how the boys were teasing her, how the boys said, I'm just a girl, I can't join them. And she's pretty athletic, and she's, she wants to be in there. She wants to play with the boys. And so, it is taking responsibility as men, as boys, and teaching our boys about respecting equality. And so, it's a PeaceLearning experience. And if boys don't have those skills, it's because they haven't been sort of pushed to or encouraged to
or even
cultivate.
Or even seen it. I know, and I'm a traditionalist in many ways, and I think it's, in our household, we like to do things equally. But, I think that there are certain traditional roles that I've taken on in the home, partly because of my culture, the way I was raised, and partly because I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with that. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but I also think it's important to show the flip side to that. And some days, Dad does get up and do carpool in the morning, or Dad does run to the market, or Dad cleans up after I've cooked dinner. It's nice to break what some still on TV show as roles, like gender roles, and these are the roles that everybody's supposed to play, and these are their positions. I think it's really important to let boys know that when you're living in a real world, the real world is everybody pitches in and helps out, and when you're in a healthy partnership and in a healthy relationship, that's what it is, unless that healthy relationship has been clearly defined as long time, old school traditions. And if that works for somebody's house, that's great. But I think those kids who live in that kind of household also need to be prepared that when they step out into the world, there are many other kinds of households that exist. And you're not wrong and they're not wrong, and we can coexist together. So arm each other with the tools to have that conversation and the willingness to love somebody in spite of that not being who you are. I think is where we still need to.
I love that
approach. So.
I love that. That's so well said and inspiring. Like, it wants me go and have those conversations with the boys and the boys teams and perhaps the coaches. Some of the coaches.
Yes, because my little one wanted to play flag football, and they were like, "Sorry, you can't do it." And she was like, "But wait, there's a girl at a school down the street. Yeah. She gets to."
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. So maybe perhaps we can take one step forward and try and unpack what it means to get a little flexible with some of those gender type roles and positions, because like you I also appreciate traditions, and I think there's a lot of joy in honoring traditions and our heritage, and but I also know that the future of global citizenship requires, if you want to be successful, you have to have flexibility in being flexible throughout some of these shifts or changes or reverse roles and so forth. And so for the young fathers, the young dads who choose to stay home and take care of their children while their moms, the wives are out there and working, and it's a different world. It's a very different world today. It's a modern life, and I think so much growth has come out of it, but we also have to pass on those traditions and values to the next generation, because if they're rigid, they're not going to really have a good time.
I think the rigidity stagnates the natural process of change, and I think that so many people think that the world and society is stagnant, and the tones and the trends were set so long ago and they shouldn't change, but that's not life. I mean, that's just not what it is. Science and technology, and so the technology has changed with social media. I mean, that's the way that the world was supposed to be, and that the world is ever changing, and that's a really beautiful thing, and we should embrace that.
We should embrace it, just like we're embracing the White Wednesdays movement in the Middle East. So women are now saying no to mandatory hijab. And with just a very simple, symbolic move of unveiling and then putting their hijab on a stick and just raising the stick up. And so we have this very powerful movement, women who are saying no to inequality, and they're speaking their truth. So, and that's another conversation, another Mom Talk, which we will have.
I totally want to sit in on that. I'm fast. That is so... Yeah. Wow, that just inspired me to, and makes me want to clap. Good for them.
Yes,
good
for them. Good for you.
Yes.
Good for you for saying no to inequality. Thank you for watching today's Mom Talk, and until next time, peace and love.
Thank you for having me, Nelly.
Thank you.